Yeah, hello everyone and welcome back. So today we are going to see about ngDoCheck lifecycle hook method. So first we will see the introduction of ngDoCheck, and then second we are going to see why and when to use ngDoCheck and how it is different from ngOnChange. And also we are going to see the difference between ngDoCheck lifecycle hook method and ngOnChange, and when and where to use this both lifecycle hook method. And then we are going to do the coding, and we are going to see an example, a very easy example where I will try to implement this ngDoCheck, and then I will tell you in which scenarios you can use ngDoCheck in your like real Angular project. And then we are going to see the performance of this ngDoCheck. So what things we need to highlight and we need to take care while using ngDoCheck. Yeah, so these are the some points which we are going to discuss in today's lecture. Yeah, so let us start with the introduction to ngDoCheck. So basically, ngDoCheck lifecycle hook is a very powerful but often misunderstood part of Angular. So here is a complete guide to make you understand about this concept of ngDoCheck lifecycle hook method. Okay, so ngDoCheck is a lifecycle hook provided by Angular, and it called during every change detection run. So let's say that if there is any change detected by Angular, then this ng do check will get called by Angular automatically. So as a developer, we don't need to write or we don't need to call it explicitly, but it will be called automatically by Angular when there is any change detection done in Angular. So it allows developer to implement custom change detection logic. Let's say that in your application, if there is a scenario where you have to write some custom logic when there is a change detection, then you can use this ng do check. So signature will be simply ng do check and then like void, so it doesn't return any value. So that's why the return type is void for this lifecycle hook method. And this method is invoked every time Angular checks for change in the component. So as I told you, if there is a change deducted by Angular in a component, then this ngDoCheck method will be called. So if you implement it, then you can use your custom logic if there is any change deducted for that particular component. Okay, so this is very useful lifecycle hook method, but it is like not mostly use, and this is like misunderstood in Angular by the developer. Okay, so today we are going to see in a very deep manner. So let's move to the next is that why and when to use ngDoCheck. So this is very important that you should understand when you can use it and why to use it, right? So Angular provide default change detection with ngOnChange, which could work well with input decorator. You okay, so you know that input decorator we use whenever we have to change send the data, okay, from a parent component to a child component, then we use input decorator. So input decorator are capturing by the change deduction. So if there is any change in the parent, then those value will go to child, right? So Angular will detect a change. So in this scenario, it will call ng do check. So ngDoCheck gives you a finer control, especially for these like three scenarios where you need to detect change not handled by Angular default detection. Okay. So second point, you are using like mutable object or arrays, then their internal values changes without changing the reference. So ngDoCheck will means it will be useful where the internal values are changing without changing the reference. Okay, yeah, so this point we can see when we will implement the code for this, so that will be very clear for you. Yeah, so but for now you can just keep this theory. Okay, so once we will start implementing a practical example, then like it will be very crystal clear that when to use ng do check. So third point, you want to track custom logic on every change detection cycle. Okay, so as I told you, if there is a requirement where you have to write a custom logic when there is any change detection by Angular, then you can go with ngDoCheck. Okay, yeah. So now there is some difference between ngOnChange versus ngDoCheck. So both are both lifecycle hook methods get called when there is a change deduction by Angular. But point is when to use or where to use these methods or lifecycle hook method. First can be how it get triggered when at that input property changes. As I told you, when we are transferring data from parent to child component, then we use input decorator, right? So if there is a change in the property when we are using at the input, then we can go with ng on change. And this ng do check with every change detection cycle. It doesn't depend on whether it is with the input or with anything other like property. If there is a change detection done, then ng do check will get called. Now we will see the second point, that is a granularity, that when like detects new input reference and can inspect object deeply. So okay, so third point is like simple use case. Ng on change is for simple use case, and ng do check for complex, for custom detection. Okay, and performance wise, ng on change is efficient, but ng do check we need to take care. It can be expensive sometimes if we use overused. So means there should be like very yeah, I mean that you should take care while using ng do check. Okay, now let's move directly to code, and let's see at which scenario ng do check will get hit, and in which scenario ng on change will get hit by Angular. So this will help you to understand when to use ng do check or when to use ng on change. So let's move directly to our code section. So here we already have a parent component and a child component. So we will try to transfer the data from parent to child again. Okay, yeah. So for that yeah, these are my old code. Let me comment it out. Okay, now okay, so for this example I will create one array. Okay, I will create one array. Okay, in which I have, let's say, item 1, item 2, item 3. So these are the three elements or object present inside this item reference. Okay, so let's create one add items method. So this dot items dot put item 4. So what we are doing, we are trying to push that a fourth item in this item array. Okay, so let me comment it out. Pushes items to existing array. And here we are not changing the reference. Okay, reference does not change. So here the main point to notice is that here reference of this array is not getting changed. It is just updating the array in the same reference. Okay, just we are adding item 4 with this method add item, right? So in the same manner we are going to create one more method. Let's say add items with new reference. Mhm. And here this dot items, and then what we are doing, we are adding another item, let's say 5. Okay, and here you can see we are changing the reference. So let me put comment. creates a new array. So this will create a new array in which so it is going to add the item 5 in the new array. So reference changes. Okay, so I have created two methods: add item, in which it is adding item 4 in the existing array, but here it is creating a new array and then adding item 5. Okay, so I hope till now it is clear. Now, so let's move to uh, here. Okay, so I need to comment this. Okay, so what we will do, we will create one button. Okay, in the button we will add click event. So add item. Okay, add item, and add item same reference. Okay, so this is the header of this button. Okay, so this will call, so when we click this button, this will call add item, and then it will add item 4 to the same existing array. Now let me create one more button. So in this button again we will use the click event. We will use the click event, and mm, okay, and this time we will use add item with non reference. Okay, so let's put add item new reference. Okay, so all right, so here I have created two button. Okay, in which we are calling different methods. Let me add means add the child component here, and here we are going to pass these items. Okay, these items, and then we are going to store these items in the items variable in child. So let's move to child component directly here. Okay, so this is the child component. So these are all my old implementations. Let me remove or comment out this. All right, now in this child. Okay, so let's create one input decorator. Let's create one input decorator, and let's say items. Okay, this will be of a string array, and this will be string array, and then let's say one previous length, something like that, uh, equals to 0. Okay, I'm assigning with this previous length as an 0, and then we can use ng on change, right? Oh, sorry, we have to use ng, not ng on. Okay, okay, so both I will show you how to use ng on change and how to use ng do check. So basically we are going to see when the ng on change or ng do check is going to get hit. Okay, so ng on change called change. Okay, so here let's say what we can write: items reference changed. Called, yeah, like this. So this is my ng on change. So we have just added let me put one condition: if change in this, if there is any changes in the items, okay, then this console will get print. Now let me add the another lifecycle the lifecycle hook method, that is ngDoCheck. All right. Okay. So here again, uh, okay, this is closing here. Now it's fine. So okay, so let's add one more if condition. If this dot, if this dot items, okay, length is not equals to this dot previous length, it means any value has been added. Okay, then we will show this console in ng do check cold. Okay, and then also we can add something like items array length changed. All right, so in this what we are doing in this ng do check, we are checking if the length is not same like the previous length, then we are simply putting a console, and then we will see that ng do check has been called. So this dot, and oh yeah, and also we can print means display this value, this dot previous length equals to this dot item dot length. All right, yeah, so till here we have done. Now in our child html, let me remove this. All right, now let's say I have one paragraph. In this we are showing item length, and this item length, let's say items question mark dot le and gth length. All right, so let me save this. Okay, this is an extra code get added. So this is ng do check. Let me close this class, save it, save this. This is parent.html items. Okay, uh, app child item. So html. Okay, here spelling is not correct. No worries, I will change here. Items. Okay, yeah, now let's save it. So now first of all, this parent will get loaded. In this we will see two buttons, basically add items and add item with new reference. Okay, so let's go to chrome. Here let me open the inspect element for you. All right, so let me clear the logs of this console. So here you can see uh, all right, what is the problem? Let's do one thing. Let's rebuild this again. Ng serve. Okay, okay, there is some problem. Okay, I think spelling is not correct. Let me change this here in this HTML child. We are using items. Okay, and here we are using better. Let's change this. This is making so much confusion. this is making so much confusion. So this will be items. Let me copy paste everywhere. Items. Items. All right. So in the HTML again we can use items now. Okay. And in the child we have items dot length, and in the TS also we are using items. Let me save this. Okay. Now let's go to Chrome, and yeah, so now you can see that we have two methods: add item same reference and add item new reference. Now you can see it here. What happens if I click with the same, means if I try to add a new item in the array where we are not changing the reference, we are trying to add a new item in the same array, then which life cycle will get called? So in this, okay, if I click here, uh, okay, if I click here, then what is happening? Change. Mm, okay, so item length is what's showing here. Okay, this is the item length. There is some problem in this code. I think we have to investigate. Item length, items dot length. This is TS. Okay, items this dot item dot length. ITEMS dot length LENGTH. Okay, I think this is correct, but somehow this is not getting picked. Okay, items dot, save this. This is items. Okay, let me do it again. Okay, so now it shows item 0. Okay, I think this method is not getting called. Let me see what happened. This is our HTML add item, right? This should call a event, and it should call this method add items. Okay, so this should update this item array, and then it should push the data to child component here. Okay, let me compile it. I have saved all the files. ngserve. Okay, I see there is a problem with the length. Okay, I'm not sure why this is not picking, but yeah. Okay, what we can do for now, we will simply uh, okay, so this was not taking as an like operator checking for the null. So we are adding just simply items dot length. Okay, and then we will see now. Okay, So now this is loaded. Okay, so now you can see the current item length is 3 because we have 3 item on that. So if I try to add a new item in the same reference, then what happens? You see here in the logs, if I click this, then it's only called ngDoCheck, because ngDoCheck will get called with the every detect change. Okay, here ngOnChange was not called because this we added the new item in the existing array. But now if we add an item to a new array, then okay, so let me clear this. If I add a new reference, then you see here ngDoCheck and ngOnChanges both are called. It means when we do ng means when we add any item to the same existing array, then it only called ngDoCheck. But if we add an item to a array or to a mutable object, when where we are creating the new object of an array and then adding the item, then ngOnChange will also get called. Yeah, so this is the scenario where you can check how you can use ngDoCheck and ngOnChange. So basically, so what is happening, Angular does not detect a change in the items array with ngOnChanges. Okay, because the reference hasn't changed. Here in the first case, the reference was not changed, so ngOnChange lifecycle hook was not called by the Angular. Only ngDoCheck was called. But in the second case, when we added an item into the new array, then it calls both ngDoCheck and ngOnChanges. Okay, so conclusion is that ngDoCheck will get run on each cycle. So we manually check the length and added the log changes there, right, in the method. So the conclusion is that ngDoCheck will get called every time whenever there is a change reduction, but ngOnChange will get only get called when there is a change in the reference of the mutable object. So this is the difference, right? Okay, so there are some few point we need to take care. Now let's discuss about the performance considerations. So ngDoCheck runs frequently, right? So potentially multiple times per second. So the best practice will be avoid heavy competition in ngDoCheck. Otherwise, every time this will be called whenever there is will be any chain deduction, then we should avoid any heavy competition or heavy, or because otherwise the logic will get duplicated. Better use it only when needed. So just check your requirement, that in which change deduction we want particular logic. Okay, third point, consider key value differs or iterable differs for better performance in tracking change in object and array. Yeah, so this is a very important topic also. You can use key value differs and iterable differs. So guys, if you don't have idea about these topics, then you can comment it out. So I will try to create another lecture or a separate lecture how to use key value differs or iterable differs to see the change in the object on an array in the change reduction. Okay, yeah, so these are some performance considerations you should keep. So summary of this lecture is that ngDoCheck gives full control over change reduction. So you should always use ngDoCheck with a cautions. Okay, we should try to use ngDoCheck if it is required, because in every change reduction it will get called. Second point, we have discussed use it when Angular default mechanism like ngOnChange are not sufficient. Yeah, so default mechanism will be ngOnChange. If there is a complex scenario or requirement is there where ngOnChange is not fulfilling, then go with ngDoCheck. Be mindful of performance, because performance will get impacted by this ngDoCheck. So you have to take care of this. Last point is consider built-in differ helpers for complex object or array. So this is important. You can use iterable differ or key value differ. Okay, yeah. So this is all about this lecture. I hope you got a pretty much idea how to use or where to use this ngDoCheck. Thank you and have a nice day.